Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Kleber Van Zant, minister of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Venice. This is our second Sunday morning to attempt a live stream from our lovely sanctuary here at the corner of Pinebrook and Edmondson in beautiful Venice, Florida. Happy Valentine's Day to you, and a happy President's Day weekend as well, where we commemorate the birthdays of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. In today's service, we'll focus on Mr. Lincoln, one of our former presidents who fought to maintain the Union rather than tear it apart. If you'd like to know more about this congregation and its many opportunities for learning, growth, and connection, you can peruse our calendar and announcements on Facebook or on our webpage at uucov.org. If you're on YouTube, please like this video by hitting the thumbs up icon, leave a note in the comments section below, and click the subscribe button if you would too. All these things help get our message out there further. Also, we hope you'll consider surfing over to our website at uucov.org, clicking the donate button, and giving as generously there as you can. We hope you'll find something in this service that speaks to you and maybe lifts you up or challenges you in ways that lead to spiritual reflection and personal growth. We're glad you've joined us. Welcome to church this morning. The prelude, Minuetto by Domenico Scarlatti, begins our worship. Our call to worship comes from the Reverend Teresa I. Soto. Bring your broken alleluias here. As a community, we begin again, and from the pieces, we will build something new. There is work that only you can do. We wait for you to join us. Let us worship together. Our hymn is number 101, Abide With Me, the first verse.
Abide with me, fast falls the eventide, the darkness deepens, still with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless soul, abide with me.
Our annual pledge drive continues this week, and we hope you've already returned your pledge card either by snail mail or email. In conjunction with our pledge drive, this week I dropped by the home of Carol and Bill Wolfers, and I asked them what this church means to them. Here's what they said.
So after moving to Florida to spend the winter months, we found that a UU church was meeting at the ranch. community center for a mobile home park. People were friendly that were at the meeting, and Rev. Suzanne Nazian gave very interesting sermons. We soon became members at the strong encouragement of Kendra Muntz. Bill and I have been members of the UU Buffalo Church for 25 years, and we're very comfortable with its philosophy. So we knew UUism. I soon realized that as liberal-thinking people, we were in the minority in Venice, Florida. We found friends among our fellowship groups and were stimulated by our discussions and various meetings. The pastors seemed okay, too. I came to think of UCOV as an oasis of thoughtful sharing with thinking, proactive people. So it has been my pleasure to use 20 years of experience in the business world helping Reverend Suzanne, serving on the board of trustees, and participating in several committees. In other words, this church has been very important to me. Amen.
I can echo everything that Carol has just said and add to it that I did serve on the board in the Buffalo Church, and then I served on the board here under Dale Pavenmeyer as president. I was vice president. So early on, we became quite active, and people like Kendra had a big influence on us. And one of the other things that has been very important to me is the wide diversity of points of view that people express. Even though we're all UUs, there still is quite a bit of difference in the way we express ourselves. And I find that very comforting. One of my favorite old sayings is that hell is a place where everybody is like me. So UCOV has been very important to me because it's not a hell. It's a very warm, welcoming place with lots of interesting people, more than willing to share their ideas. And we've been happy to be able to help out in committee work and so on. We're just unhappy that right now we're all stuck with this pandemic. But I would have to say that of all the things that I've experienced in Florida, besides the climate, which is somewhat better than Buffalo in the wintertime, the UCOV has been extremely important to me.
Our children have their own religious education class by Zoom each Sunday at 10 a.m. If you'd like to attend or help your child to attend, login information can be found on our website at uucov.org and on our Facebook page. And now I invite you into a spirit of prayer and meditation. God of many names and mystery beyond all our naming, we come to this moment remembering the words and the deeds of those who passed by here before. We come to honor the heritage bequeathed to us by those who once toiled in these fields of uncertainty. We come and we wonder, how were our forebears able to face such odds as they faced? How was it they survived such defeats as were handed them? How on earth did they overcome the powers arrayed against them? As we ponder these questions, we find that we are still hungry for justice and equity. We find that we are still thirsty for love and comfort. We find that we still long for connection with other people and connection with that which is eternally beyond our knowing. We lift up those in this community who face change, challenge, or loss this day as we hold within our hearts all who suffer. And now we pray, each in our own ways, into the silence. The hopes of this community are offered forth in the names of all those who've gone before and in the names of all those who will come after, in the names of all the helpers of humankind. Shalom, salam, amen, and blessed be. Our interlude is Larghetto by Domenico Scarlatti, Dr. Marcel Leonard at our piano. Back in Springfield, everybody knew it. Abe Lincoln was crazy. He'd been seen wandering the streets with his Bible, ranting at anyone who would listen about how our holy book contains half-truths and lies. Can you imagine? He hadn't slept, he wasn't working, he cared nothing for personal hygiene, he stunk to high heaven, and he looked terrible. Lord knows he always looked funny enough anyway. 6'4", gawky appendages all out of control, a face only a mother could love. And his mother had died. Sister, aunt, uncle died too. Whoever knew what had caused this latest breakdown? Some people said he might have got turned down again by one of his few love prospects. You know, a guy came by the shop here once and said another of Abe's girls had died a few years back. I guess that'd do it, wouldn't it? Send a man right over the edge, especially a man that tends towards the bizarre anyway. They say he had friends, close ones, who would try to keep up with him through all of his strange shenanigans, but they also say that he'd get to where he just wouldn't listen to them. Go off on some of them like a wild man. Nope, you can't tell about a person like that. Best to keep your distance. You never know whether what he's got might be catching. We don't often talk about our heroes like this. But there's a book out there, Lincoln's Melancholy, How Depression Challenged a President and Fueled His Greatness. It does just that. Author Joshua Wolf Schenck argues in this that Abraham Lincoln suffered from bouts of clinical depression, what was called melancholy at the time. Now, this mental illness, and depression is classified as a mental illness, has been well documented by previous historians, Carl Sandburg, among others. But as Schenck explains, mental illness of any sort carries such a social stigma that Lincoln's struggles of that variety have been largely ignored when it comes to figuring out what made that great man great. what brought a backwoods bumpkin to national prominence and gave him the courage, ability, stamina, and just plain chutzpah to take on the yoke of the presidency at such a desperate time as he did. And no doubt Abe Lincoln had a hard life. Yes, he grew up in a log cabin, which is an image that reeks of romance and the quaintness of quiet nights out on the prairie. Through those long nights, as the mythical story goes, he read by candlelight, poring over the classics, studying to become a lawyer. What a lovely image. Honest Abe, studying hard, pulling himself up by the bootstraps, a real American rags to riches success story. But look past that image for a moment to the difficulties and the barbarities of life on the frontier, where the work was never done, the fruits of one's labor never sure, the continuity of one's connections to community never certain. Sounds a little bit like life during a pandemic, almost. Death was an ever-present reality. His mother, his sister, other family members died. His first love, according to some, Miss Anne Rutledge, died. Lincoln knew loss firsthand, knew suffering and emotional pain in depths that make us want to avert our eyes. If depression needs an external trigger, Lincoln certainly experienced disastrous, depression-inducing events in abundance. If depression is an internal reaction to eternal events, Lincoln was known to be predisposed to his, what they call, melancholy from a very young age on. He was known to speak of suicide, even wrote poetry about it. His favorite poems all seemed to be about death. I guess mine are too, but we're talking about Lincoln here. There are many descriptions from contemporaries about Lincoln's tendency to keep to himself, sitting in a corner, head drooping, a look of extreme sadness on his face. And those descriptions say that he might sit like that for hours. Once in a while, he might come out of that personal cocoon to open up and tell funny stories to someone and laugh heartily with them for a moment, only to retreat again to the chair in the corner and to his mental landscape of apparent anguish. At one point, he put on paper an eloquent explanation of the way he was feeling in the depths of one of his depressive moods. On January 23, 1841, Lincoln wrote a letter to John T. Stuart, his first law partner, and in that letter he said, "I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would not be one cheerful face on the earth. Whether I shall ever be better, I cannot tell. I awfully forebode I shall not. To remain as I am is impossible. I must die or be better, it appears to me." Just after that letter in 1841, Lincoln was diagnosed as having hypochondriasis, a set of symptoms believed at the time to be caused by too much black bile in the gut. The treatment, as prescribed in a book by the Universalist physician Benjamin Rush. Rush was a signer of both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and is considered the father of modern psychiatry, and, as I said, was a Universalist. The treatment was to bleed the patient severely and to blister the temples and neck with heated cups, drawing blood to the surface. Then vomiting and diarrhea were induced to purge the bile further. When the patient was thought to be emptied, he was fed stimulants, coffee, tea, ginger, black pepper, and then made to exercise extensively, especially by riding on horseback. If the treatment sounds worse than the disease, frequently it was. But, no pain, no gain. So Lincoln was no stranger to illness, no stranger to death. How could he put all those troubles behind him as he stepped onto the national stage in the midst of the crisis that was the 1860 election? Well, he couldn't. His illness, depression, would lurk in the shadows with him the rest of his life, and so he carried all that baggage with him as he took the train to Washington, as he took the reins of power, as he worked to keep the Union from falling further and further apart. It didn't get any better. His daily life in Washington was taken up with job seekers and critics, to say nothing of the minutiae of running a war. He never had a general he thought he could trust until 1864, when Grant came along and Lincoln finally handed the military decision-making over to him. Day to day, his life was a workaday drudgery that never let up. Contrast that to the coddled life of an ex-president today. And death always hovered close. In 1862, Lincoln's beloved son, Willie, died. The president and Mary Todd grieved mightily. Lincoln also grieved mightily the innumerable Americans who had been lost and would continue to be lost in the war he oversaw. Lincoln himself had made decisions in carrying out the office of the presidency that had sent people to their deaths. Thousands, no less. He had done it because he felt he had to, because it was all he felt he could do, but it showed. So I'd like to share with you a few photographs of Mr. Lincoln. We'll start with one of him as a younger man, and then we'll progress through to the very last portrait that he sat for. If you look into his eyes, I think you can see the sadness there. You can feel the pain in some of them. You can sense the weight of living with the knowledge that the decision one makes every day mean life or death for real people, in real places, in real situations. This war was not just a spot on a map halfway around the world for this president. This was his country. These were his people. These were his decisions that he felt most keenly. So you can hear and feel his anguish and hard-won experience in a letter to Ms. Fanny McCullough, the daughter of William McCullough, who was a former county clerk whom Lincoln knew well from Illinois. During the war, McCullough was killed in battle at Coffeyville, Mississippi. Here's the letter. December 23rd, 1862, Executive Mansion, Washington. Dear Fanny, it is with deep grief that I learn of the death of your kind and brave father, and especially that it is affecting your young heart beyond what is common in such cases. In this sad world of ours, sorrow comes to all, and to the young it comes with bitterest agony because it takes them unawares. The older have learned to ever expect it. I'm anxious to afford some alleviation of your present distress. You cannot now realize that you will ever feel better. Is not this so? And yet it is a mistake. You are sure to be happy again. To know this, which is certainly true, will make you some less miserable now. I've had experience enough to know what I say, and you need only believe it to feel better at once. The memory of your dear father, instead of an agony, will yet be a sad, sweet feeling in your heart, of a purer and holier sort than you have known before. Please present my kind regards to your afflicted mother. Your sincere friend, A. Lincoln. Lincoln personally wrote many such letters to grieving families around the nation. And over all this loomed the question of slavery. Lincoln felt most keenly the importance of ridding this country of what he thought was a great sin. In the beginning, at least, it wasn't that his heart went out to black field hands he knew to be his equal. No, like most white folks of the time, he held condescending racial ideas that would appall us today. But he did want to live by the words of the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal, rather than by the Constitution, wherein some men are to be counted as only 3/5. He came to know that the peculiar institution was ruining the lives of the enslaved and the masters, indeed ruining the entire country, both North and South. He had to be pushed by many, notably Frederick Douglass, but pushed he was, and the decision was his, an Emancipation Proclamation that had little technical effect in law, but had great practical effect throughout the land and probably hastened the end of the war and the end of slavery in America. Would any of us have done so well? Would our connections with a congregation like this one mean that maybe we could gather our fortitude to step up and do what needed to be done? Who knows? Lincoln was not a church-going sort, which is not to say that he was not connected in some way to something larger than himself. Early in life, he read the Bible to critique it, tear it apart. Later in life, he read more for comfort and guidance. Throughout his life, his was no soft theology of the suburbs. He knew in his bones that it was possible for God to be on both sides of a conflict, or for God to be on neither side. He said more than once that he surely hoped not that God was on our side, but that we were on God's. A hard-won humility, if ever there was one. In his second inaugural address in 1865, 6 weeks before he was killed, he preached a theology of forgiveness rarely heard in our politics these days, concluding his address that day with these words: "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations." With just a few words, Lincoln set out more than anyone else what this country could be, should be, would be after the war and forever after. With malice toward none, with charity for all. This is a call to acceptance of one's former enemies. This is a call to acceptance of those who suffer or who live with illnesses of various kinds. This is a call to acceptance of those who, like Lincoln himself, live with mental illnesses, melancholy, depression, 100 others. I know a lot of us are down and even depressed here during the pandemic. And I think there's plenty enough to be depressed about without us treating each other badly. Back in Springfield, we all knew he was a mess, and so we avoided him like the plague. But thinking back on it now, after he freed so many people, I wished I'd taken more time with him. Yep, he freed a lot of people, even while he himself was a captive of that awful, awful illness of his. What I wouldn't give to shake his hand now. So may it be. Our hymn is 107. Now sing we of the brave of old, the first and last verses.
Now sing we of the brave of old, who would not sell themselves for gold, yet left us riches manifold. Alleluia. Who long the world's old sorrows bore, and toiled and loved and suffered sore, and being dead live evermore. Alleluia.
Our benediction today is from Nelson Mandela. I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way. But I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities. My walk is not yet ended. Go in peace, walk softly on your paths, and may the light of love shine on you all your days.